Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here. This is my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 4 with Black Ice. Moved some of my mechanized forces into place to better.
Right.
You should join me and go to there.
Ausrücken.
Okay. Better prepare for our invasion of Poland. What do we need? Yeah, we're going to produce even more heavy artillery. I do consider 150mm guns to be fairly heavy. Yeah, 4 ships. We maxed out on all those. Yeah, we can produce a coastal submarine. I was asked about the effectiveness of, by Django, of submarines in Black Ice versus regular Hearts of Iron 4, because he's read that Hearts of Iron 4 submarines are useless. That is not true, because I have seen one submarine, say, sink 100+ convoys. Just sit out there and sink 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 and sink. And that's obviously cost versus benefit ratio absolutely worth it. No question in my mind. Where the real sort of question is how well it does. Well, from my experience, which isn't universal, of course, but is passing through to get to other places. It seems to be, and I've not had enough experience with Black Ice. Trying to get, say, from here out to wherever. If the British just set a fleet out here, they just sink every submarine and it doesn't get anywhere. Where in reality they would be able to get by here, as opposed to operating effectively when the submarines are doing convoy raiding in the Hex. That's where they have to get near enemy vessels and will be spotted. This is an interesting sea zone here. But most sea zones, pretty big. So the idea that you couldn't sneak submarines through there. Now through the channel, that's pretty tight. And obviously this is overextended because they wanted to be able to have the center piece here. But that's where you sort of find it a little bit that they may not be as useful as you would like. But we'll see how these go for their observability and how well the British Navy. Okay, yeah, we'll sign off on that. How well the British Navy will be able to find my subs. Now, I sort of played a quick beef a while ago. I just took where we were and I played forward. Played a quick Polish campaign, through the end of Poland, and then quit. Sort of try to figure out what we need. Make sure we have enough of that kind of stuff. But I'm far from sure. I know some of the stuff we've overbuilt already, but I'm trying to balance that out. Because I don't know, quite honestly, because things have changed, and I have not dug into the details of how much attrition rate for things like rifles we're going to have. Okay. Yeah. So we get the corners. I know that isn't. We just can't build them there. Bit of a flaw in the system. You can't overbuild versus your subject's technology. So if they don't have radar, you can't build radar in their zone. But which it should be dependent on the builders, not the where it's located. Yeah, once we get that, that'll cover that up there better. Cover down into here some. Improved oil plant. Okay, great. We've been waiting for that. Recovery rates improved. Vision organizations improved. Reinforcement, factory output. Yeah, we should get that. And convoy interdiction. Let's continue to try that, because I want to try a bit of a submarine operation. Okay, the Kingdom of Romania cedes Bessarabia to the Soviet Union. Yeah, the news event, yes. Get those into the Axis. No, I haven't even got the Molotov-Ribbentrop back. That Bessarabia thing should require the Molotov-Ribbentrop pack to be able to fire, or to even start researching it. Okay, well, how long is it? 7 days. Oh, we don't need that just yet. So we don't need to start that in winter. I like my strategy, which goes back to Hearts of Iron 3. Taking down Poland, and yeah, you can try a winter attack into the west, but I think it's better to wait for at least spring and take down Poland, and then move to take down here. And you can do all that in 1 year. Very effectively, in my opinion. We can't get around. Okay, these are much shorter. Great. Those are 70 days, no regular. Naval effect, that's maybe what we're gonna do. Port side division, foreign recruitment. 35, those aren't taking too long. We don't need a bigger west wall. I presume you've gotten the announcement. Well, if you haven't noticed, factory and other infrastructure build costs will be cheaper in states that have higher infrastructure than lower, or quicker, or whatever you want to say. They've announced that now, so and they're still working out as they've said, just all the 56 days second Vienna War. That sounds let's do that. Get more factories. Just the exact math on some of this stuff. Great. On how it's going to work out, but I think it's a good idea. I actually think maybe even a better idea would be the higher level of the infrastructure. The more efficient the factories are in that state. Either additionally to, or we're doing already doing the naval. National focus. Let's get better Panzer IV, shall we? Yeah. Or instead of, but either way. Okay, synthetic rubber. We'll need all of those, so get building. Panzer factory level 7 reached, great. And artillery factory 7 level reached. We're building more of those, it's helping out. Okay, large tank factories. France bans communism. Not a bad idea. Communist and the communist ideology, and those who wish to, and you have to use force to create communism, because communism, as even it sort of says in their basic manifesto, is an unnatural philosophy, or in that they believe that man will eventually develop into it, but we're not, at least at the right stage of writing, not there yet. To enforce an unnatural philosophy on people, you need to use force. It might sound a little redundant, but that's the way it is. And so they've killed more people trying to I guess we want to call it enforce communism on you than any other philosophy, any other ideology ever. And that includes crusades and whatever, various religions, because there are just so many millions of people killed. Okay, well, 144. Let's improve our anti-tank guns. So, no matter how good your philosophy is, how righteous, how supposedly beneficial to mankind is it theoretically is, is it really? Oh, we wanna, yeah, stop this. We wanna attach these guys here.
Alright.
Is it really worth killing all those people to get it? For their own good? Or is it for their own good? So I know, and I've talked to a few of you guys out there that have some sort of idealistic utopian society in mind that wouldn't be great if, and people, well, I don't care how great you think a utopian society is or would be. Why don't we live in it already if it's so great? And the basic answer is utopianism is, well, is a dream, is, utopian in that it is nowhere never. Sort of goes back to the meaning of the word. But even if you presume that you could have it, why don't we already have it? Well, it's because it's unnatural to the state of man. And to create this utopian vision, how many millions of people are you willing to kill? And then is it really... It may be good for those people that survive it, but is that really good for mankind? That's where I just have to part company with all these dreaming things. Okay, motivate speech research teams, motivate industrial, rally for miners, okay, inspire people. Okay, we've got plenty. Let's motivate research teams. That should benefit research. And those... So we have, I don't know how many Islamic fundamentalists watch my channel. They believe they're doing it in God's name, and do you really, really believe God wants you to kill all those millions of people? If you're going to have a jihad against, kill all the Christians, or Christians kill all the Muslims, you really believe that's what God wants you to do? Whatever side you're on. And, I'm not trying to defend... I defend the Crusades as a reaction to Islam's attack on the West. I don't defend the Crusades in forced conversion or just outright murder of people who believe a different thing. There's a different, the Crusade, whether it's the Crusader kingdoms or whether it's the various Spanish reconquests of Spain. It's one thing, political control, and putting political control of a Western ideology, and an ideology can include a religious belief, putting that in power, in charge, that's one thing. It's another thing to go in and kill the people who disagree with you. Now, if they are too violent, if they're too, because trust me, there were, you have the old assassins out of Islam and some of these other things. That's where the Hassashins, where the word assassin comes from. So if you're having the violent attacks, okay, maybe you have to separate people, and it's not just, but it's just the way the world is, and so you may have to deport people to other parts of the region. Again, it's not a kind thing, and whatever. That's one thing. It's another, talked about before, the breakup of Yugoslavia, and that Tito had been moving Serbs into other areas. Now, they are already messed up in different little communities between different ethnicities before, but increasing it by trying to settle Serbs in Croatian and Slovenian and other ethnic territories to try to have a local reliable population. And now that you're breaking up the greater Serbia, is it right that people lose their homes? No. But is it right that you're forming a new country with one ethnicity, speaking one language? Yeah, I know they all more or less spoke Yugoslavian. Croatian is just more of a written language difference from my understanding, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but as opposed to the Serbian language. But you're trying to create local ethnicities that are in one country, and I get that nationalism, and I'm talking to a few people about the European Union and beliefs in that. But if you're trying to create a nation state, you may need to get rid of people of a different ethnicity because so it's not fair, it's not right, but it's maybe necessary in doing that. So that's why I support the reconquest of Spain, and I don't agree with the Inquisition at all. and whether it's focused against Muslims or focused against Jews or any other group of people. But I can also say, okay, well, you have a large Muslim population and it's causing trouble. Send them back to, Muslim territories on the other side. Again, it's not right, but it may be necessary to, you have two peoples that just are at each other's throat. Maybe you need to separate them. It's that kind of thing. And so in that sense, I definitely defend the Crusades. Now, they did bad things also, not just to Muslims, but they sacked Constantinople, the city that they were supposedly protecting, and other things like that. So it's not like, oh, they were the all pure good guys versus the pure evil guys. No, but I got to pick a side. I pick the Crusades. But that doesn't mean I agree with, when they butchered large groups of populations out here. That's different from putting a, Christians in charge versus Muslims in charge. There is a difference. Okay. I think you understand. If you want to impose bad views on me, you're going to find reasons to anyways. But I think you understand where I'm coming from. Okay, motivated research teams. Yes, speed up all research. Great. 1%. Okay. Panzer IV is for the Waffen SS. Panzer III is for the Waffen SS. I think that's been firing about every time I start the game up. And a few of us have been talking on some of the message boards about the so-called Muslim ban in America, and that America should be willing to take the 20,000 number of refugees, compared to the very large numbers that some of the European countries have taken, over 1 million in Germany. Well, you know what? That isn't a very big number, 20,000 a year. But realize we have tens of millions of economic refugees in America already. That some of them are escaping violence. A lot of them will claim, if they get into America, claim refugee status. We sort of, at least under the previous administration, had to let them in, and before we sorted them out, and then they never showed up to their hearings to sort out whether they were under physical threats. So some of them coming out of places like El Salvador, and they claim, and there is a lot of very harsh gang violence going down there, that they claim that their lives are under threat, so they've come to America. And I'm sure America may be a safer place than El Salvador, or some of these other rather violent countries, where Panama is rather peaceful. But Mexico, in my opinion, is in a low-grade civil war going right now, with the various drug cartels against each other, against the government, and back and forth. So people may be escaping violence there, coming to America, but they're definitely economic refugees. They're looking for a better economic situation, and they're leaving destitute poverty. And we get millions of them new every year coming into America. And we already have tens of millions here. So we have millions of refugees. Again, they may be more economic than people fleeing, terror bombings in Aleppo, but we still have lots of refugees in America for that. We also have refugees, economics, that have come in from China and other places around the world that have snuck into the U.S. illegally, and they're here, and they are really straining our support systems for because I know Europe hates, you thought that, Americans dying in the street. No. Before Obamacare, if you were seriously ill, you showed up at a hospital, you got free treatment if you couldn't afford it. They would oh, here's a bill. Oh, you don't have any money. Okay, it's free. Oh, you have a house? You own a house? Well, we're going to make you give that up. So if you could pay, you had to pay. But if you couldn't pay, you got free health care. And then if you were poor, you applied for it, you had Medicaid, which was a sort of minimum health insurance, if you applied for it and if you qualified for that. So we already had a certain level, and now it wasn't, oh, it's enough to cure your cancer. No, but it was some health care. You weren't dying in the streets. That's really a myth. So America's always had a certain level of health care. Wasn't equal for everyone. You got better health care if you could pay for it, if you had better insurance, absolutely. But we have a huge budget, and that's sort of one of the reasons our health insurance has gotten so high for people, because all the people who go to hospitals can't pay for it. That's evened out, and the sort of the insurance coverage, they the way they bill it, sort of arcane. But if you couldn't afford it, you got free health care in America of a minimum standard. And I'll agree, it's in some cases very minimum standard. But you weren't dying. You know, if you were dying, you could die in a hospital bed. They weren't putting you out in the street. That's, but it's not necessarily, perfect by any means. But so we have a lot of these costs. Also, we have a lot of children. Now, they may be U.S. citizens, but their parents came here illegally. And a lot of them have come here illegally as children. They get free education systems. A lot of them don't speak English, so that's additional education costs that our local communities have to pay for. And since a lot of the illegals don't pay any income tax, whether they or payroll taxes or other sorts of things like that, even when they meet the level of economics that they should, that's a great cost on America. So we're already having millions of economic refugees in America. And so I get the idea that other parts of the world, like Europe, may think we're not doing our share for the Syrian refugee crisis. We've, either by choice or being forced upon us, we've had a large number of refugees in America that we are taking care of. Now, I personally think, we for a long time have had a policy of allowing Cuban refugees into America once they touch American soil, and not sending them back because they were persecuted in Cuba and we hated the Cuban regime. So it was sort of supporting their anti-government forces. I'm of the opinion is, if and when the Cuban regime changes to being a more free thing, when Raul Castro dies, and then if there's a counter-revolution or whatever you want to call it, and a more free setup, I think all the refugees, not their American citizens, children, or if they become American citizens in the meantime, but all those that are on refugee status, like a lot that have came under the Obama administration, and other things, that they fled, that are maybe a bit more economic refugees now than political, but that they got here, and so they're just got in here, so that since they're Cuban, once Cuba, if it ever does in their lifetime, converts back to being a more free system, go, okay, you got 6 months, you're out of America, you can sell up your property, you can sell up your stuff, your refugee status is gone because Cuba is no longer an oppressive state. I hope you've enjoyed your stay, but go back home. Now, it's different if you've become a U.S. citizen, or of course for their children who were born here, they're now U.S. citizens. That's different. But if you're a Cuban refugee with theoretically permanent living status, until the situation changes. That's how I sort of feel about this Syrian thing, is if we ever deem that it's relatively peaceful, and if we deem that returning refugees, the Assad government isn't going to threaten your life or whatever, if we deem that, I think they should all go back home. Because they were here, they came to the U.S. because their country was war-torn. If it changes that it's not, then we should send them back home. I'm not saying it may not ever in their lifetime ever become peaceful, so they may spend their whole life in the U.S. That's fine. But if it does become peaceful, I think the refugees should have to go home at that point. In an orderly way, and like I say, 6 months, a year, so if they can sell up whatever they can't take home with them, so it isn't like an overnight uprooting, so you got some months to get your life back in order. Go home. You go, oh, well, you're splitting up your families. Well, take your American children back to Syria with you. They'll still be American citizens. Once they get old enough, they can come back to the U.S. because they're U.S. citizens. Once theoretically born in the U.S. We're not splitting up the families. The family can take their American citizen children back to wherever. And then once the children are old enough to be on their own, they can come back to the U.S. because they're American citizens. That's how I feel about it. Not necessarily that's how the law is. I don't know the details of the refugee law. Well, sort of on that somewhat depressing note, I think we're going to end this episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking and viewing the videos. And thanks for putting up with some of my political ideas. I don't expect you to have to agree to them to listen to the channel. I like people who disagree with me, who talk to me and share their ideas. I know I'm not going to convince you and you're not going to convince me, but I like to understand them better, and I hope you have enough of an inquiring mind to try to understand my perspective as well, and not just go, oh, you're a this, I'm out. But I know some people will. Thanks anyways. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.